and welcome to the Energy Mixx Radio Show, where we dive deep into the forces that are shaping America's energy future. Today, we're honored to have Jim Welty, president of the Marcellus Shale Coalition, joining us. The coalition represents exploration, production, and supply chain partners across the Appalachian Basin, working to responsibly develop clean job creation. I don't like that. To working to responsibly develop natural gas job creating from the Marcellus and the Utica shale play. And under Jim's leadership, the coalition has been at the forefront of the debate on pipeline expansion, regulatory challenges, and environmental stewardship, and energy affordability. With natural gas playing a critical role in grid reliability in the U.S. energy independence, the Marcellus Shale Coalition is navigating complex issues from wastewater management to infrastructure bottlenecks and litigation over drilling setbacks and evolving environmental regulations. And Jim, you bring a wealth of unique perspectives on how the shale development impacts families, businesses, and communities from across the region. Today, we're going to explore the opportunities and the challenges that have been facing the industry and what is the future of Americans' energy and what it might look like for your area. So, you are a first-time guest on our show. I want to begin, Jim, by introducing yourself to us as well as your new role. Last time I interviewed and talked to you guys and caught up with you all, I was dealing with a new president who I understand. I was dealing with a President Dave Calhoun. Wait, it's Callahan, right? Let me back up. I interviewed Dave Calhoun, who has since retired. So welcome to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. Let's begin, Jim, by telling me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Kym, it's an honor to be here today and privileged to have the conversation with you. I've been in the public policy arena now for a little over 30 years and been representing the energy industry since about 2005. Really have been engaged in the Marcellus development since the beginning of the play back in 2005 in various different roles. But I've been with the coalition itself since 2013 as the Vice President of Government Affairs until the executive board saw fit to promote me at Dave Callahan's retirement last year to president. So it's been a great ride. We've seen great strides with the industry in the Appalachian Basin and in Pennsylvania, and looking forward to talking more about it today.
Now, I want to remind our listeners, thank you for your intro, but I want to remind our listeners that the Marcellus Shale Coalition, well, it's just not an average coalition or organization. And we interview a lot of y'all, all the different ones, whether it's Texoga, the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers, AXPC, excuse me, API. But you're only coalition that actually had President Trump come and speak to your organization. You all are a very important shale play, the Marcellus and the Utica. So let's back up a little bit for history purposes and tell us a little bit about what is the Marcellus Shale Coalition, and most indefinitely and importantly, what area in the area are y'all mostly known for, and how, what is it that you guys basically advocate for in your region? Because not all shale plays are the same.
Yeah. So the Marcellus Shale Coalition, or the MSC, was formed in 2008 as the shale industry was taking growth in Pennsylvania and the Appalachian Basin. And while we're Pennsylvania focused, we work very collaboratively with Ohio and West Virginia to really promote the basin, which as itself would be the third largest producing country in the world if you just look at the Appalachian Basin. What's unique about the play in Pennsylvania is we are not an associated gas play. We are a purely gas play. So it sets us apart economically when we look at what we're doing in the development going on in Pennsylvania. The MSC was founded, quite frankly, to elevate the regulatory and operating standards under which industry complied in Northeast. So we have a long history of oil and gas developments in Pennsylvania. First well being drilled in Titusville, Pennsylvania. But that is primarily a conventional play. So in 2005, as the industry began to take shape with the range resources, drilling the Renz well, there was a recognition that the structure under which the industry had been operating doesn't really apply to the unconventional shale operations, and we needed to elevate the regulatory standards for the basin and for Pennsylvania. So that's how the MSC was formed. A bunch of operators got together, shale operators, and said, we need to create an organization that's really focused on ensuring that we're extracting and processing and transporting this resource at the highest standards. And through that, we developed a regulatory structure that has been a challenge at times when you've got a regulatory agency that sometimes takes its matters into its own hands and works outside those confines. But we've got a very centric play on natural gas that is elevated on the standards under which we operate because of what the MSC has done. We've become the go-to energy organization, not just on natural gas, when we talk about broader energy in the Appalachian Basin. And I'm proud to work with the operators who have worked so hard to elevate those standards.
About 6 months ago, I went to Pennsylvania for their, I think it was called Pennsylvania AI and Technology Forum, I believe, and it was huge. It was a $90 billion announcement of President Trump actually attended, acknowledging that 90 billion was going to be put into that area to basically lead AI. And so, Jim, since you guys are primarily natural gas play, and we know that natural gas is the only thing that actually allows us to grow in the utilities and energy that we need to power these AI big data centers. Tell me a little bit about your area is obviously extremely important. I just cannot say that enough to our listeners. If you're talking about shale gas, and we're talking about how are we going to meet the demand of just for the United States, our growth trajectory path with using data centers, using AI, natural gas is going to be at the forefront of that. And so is the Marcellus Shale Coalition. How do you all see natural gas contributing to the U.S. energy independence and the grid reliability for the next decade? Like, what are you all doing? What are some of your members doing? How are you guys looking at the future and being able to get to that level that we need?
Yeah, and thanks for the question. And I must acknowledge the Energy Summit that you attended. I attended as well back in July. Really coordinated by our freshman United States Senator Dave McCormick, bringing
That's right.
together all parties. So Senator McCormick really brought together Senator Fetterman on the Democratic side, our Democratic governor, Josh Shapiro, brought in President Trump. And you're right, nearly $100 billion of announcements were made about AI data center growth that is going to occur in Pennsylvania alone, just with those announcements. And the reason for that is because we've got easy access to a tremendous energy resource that's needed to power AI-driven data centers. And I'll acknowledge something you said earlier too, is we put on an annual conference up in Pennsylvania that really focuses on the Appalachian Basin. It's one of the largest shale conferences in the world, and we get attendance from nearly 36 different countries and from participants around the states. And President Trump has actually spoken twice, then in 2015 as candidate for president, and then in 2019 as sitting president. And hopefully we'll have him back, and we continue to have the administration officials, no matter who's in charge, participate in that conference. But really, it's because of the unique resource that we have that's really elevated the energy game in the United States. And we're excited about it, and we're excited about the opportunities that are presented. Look, shale gas is going to continue to drive electric generation for decades to come. And in the basin, in the Appalachian Basin, we've got this tremendous resource and easy access. The challenges that we've had is the development of infrastructure, right? I think it's been a challenge throughout the country, is developing that infrastructure, particularly with the NGOs really engaging in the game and ground forces. So what better way to help deal with that than to build the downstream opportunities right on top of the resource. And that's what Pennsylvania provides. We've got a lot of land, we've got a lot of opportunity, a lot of locations that are conducive to site development for these data centers and AI. But it's not just that. It's not just driving the energy for those data centers. It's driving the energy for the grid. In Pennsylvania, we've gone from producing 5% of our own electricity with natural gas generation in 2005 to today we produce over 60% of our electricity from natural gas generation
Wow.
because of the development going on. And it's what's made us the number one electricity exporter in the country. So these are great stories to tell, but they're also great opportunities that we need to be taking advantage of.
Absolutely. When I keep talking about that summit because I was just truly amazed to see how many billion companies were stepping up and just throwing out billion-dollar investments. And these are huge. BlackRock, ExxonMobil, all the big guys were there to definitely put their hat in the ring, if you will, throw their hat in the ring, if you will, for that they are going to be a part of this expansion. But then after that conference, President Trump would return back to Washington and write, I think it was three executive orders, and one of them specifically was about the infrastructure problem. So let's talk about what you guys are dealing with. The pipeline expansion, pipeline infrastructure remains a bottleneck in the Appalachian Basin. What are the coalition's priorities for expanding that capacity? And how do you address the regulatory hurdles? And did the administration, when President Trump wrote those three executive orders, my understanding was it was mostly symbolic of trying to remove some of the red tape, but the red tape is still there no matter what. Has it helped in some ways, what you're seeing as far as addressing some regulatory hurdles pertaining to infrastructures? And let's specifically talk about pipeline.
Yeah. Well, it clearly has been a key focus of the industry for some time. Nine of the last 10 major pipeline projects that would
Hang
elevate.
on,
Yep.
Dave, hang on. I'm sorry, I just missed my time. Um, let me redo that. Callum, let me redo that. Okay, let me go back to my question real quick. Now, Jim, we're getting ready to go to break, but when we return, I want to talk about pipeline expansion because as we talked about that AI summit that occurred maybe 6 months ago, President Trump would return back to the White House and sign three executive orders. One of them specifically was geared at trying to remove all of the infrastructure problems and fast forward projects. I want to talk when we get back from break on did this have a good consequence for the industry? Do you see that the industry is able to move forward with some of these infrastructure bottlenecks? And specifically, we're going to drill down on the pipeline expansion. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show, and we'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that, Jim. Now let me bring you back.
That's fine.
We're back. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. My guest today is Jim Welty, who is the president of the Marcellus Shale Coalition. Jim, before the break, we were talking about how important your region is for natural gas. Natural gas is going to power these data centers and AI. And I think a lot of people still don't really understand where their utilities come from. And so your region is very important if we're going to achieve and hit our goals to stay in front of AI and keep it here in the United States and not let China come over or let China come in and try to dominate that area as well. President Trump is pretty committed to it. So I want to come back to your area and talk about pipeline infrastructure. It still remains that there's bottlenecks in the Appalachian Basin. So coming back and scratch that, the Appalachian Basin, thinking about what the president did when he came back from that conference in Pennsylvania, he would sign those three executive orders. Did you, as a coalition, see priorities? Did you see that some of the priorities have changed? Did it address some of the bottleneck issues, the regulatory issues and hurdles that you guys are dealing with, specifically when we're talking about like pipeline expansion? It's been about 6 months, and that executive order, from what I understood from some energy experts, was mostly symbolic. It really wasn't going to be able to do very much in the way of regulatory hurdles that you guys were dealing with. It's been 6 months. Tell me what you see.
Yeah, I would say it's actually more than symbolic in the terms of it sent a message to the industry that we were going to unleash American energy dominance. And I think that in of itself, from an investment perspective, really elevated what we were doing, what we were focused on in the Appalachian Basin, quite frankly, across the country. I think the positive outcomes of that is that there's a renewed focus on ensuring that we have the takeaway capacity that meets the needs. Look, 9 of the last 10 pipeline projects that would have positively impacted the Appalachian Basin were either canceled or the permits we're unable to get the permits. The 10th one took an actual act of Congress in the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and quite frankly, that Mountain Valley Pipeline is at capacity already. So we definitely need to continue to focus on the infrastructure, and this administration's focus on it is pretty important. Not just from sending the right message, but from ensuring that we've got leaders in Washington that are willing to kind of go to bat for us to see if we can get that pipe in the ground. But then again, that is why we as a coalition are so focused on the downstream component as well. As I said, being able to cite those opportunities right on top of the resource eliminates some of the bottleneck that you have when you're trying to build out that infrastructure. And that's why we've had a tremendous focus on trying to encourage those development right in the Appalachian Basin. But I do think, getting back to your question, Kym, I do think that not only did it send the right message, but we're seeing that actually take place. The Northeast Supply Enhancement announcements just in the last week or so, tremendous change in dynamics in the Northeast with getting that proposal back on track to get that gas into New York. We'd love to see the same with Constitution Pipeline, getting gas from the northern fields of Pennsylvania up into New England. And that's going to be critical over the next couple of years to ensure that we get those permits in, we get those pipelines completed. I think Williams is committed to it, and other players are committed to it. And we're just at the beginning of the game here with getting that pipe in the ground in this administration. So we're pretty bullish on what the president said in the direction that the administration is going, and hopeful that that is going to translate into tremendous value for our operators in Pennsylvania.
It is no secret, Jim, that I've never worked a day in the energy industry. I just report on it. And so a lot of times when I see things, I see them very much as a person that energy is so complicated, but yet it is very simple and streamlined if we would just get out of y'all's way and let y'all do your work, right? One of the things that always caught my attention was certain areas and certain regions that had the belief that it's the belief of not in my backyard or not here. And so pipeline seems to be one that has truly has fitted into being the bad guy, if you will. So we have areas in the United States that they were literally, before the Russian-Ukraine invasion, were importing Russian energy, if you will, sources than what we have here in the United States. I found that to be very strange and odd that the residents didn't understand of these communities. You're paying more for your utilities. You're paying more to do this as opposed to just allowing a pipeline that is a very safe thing to do in your backyard, as opposed to importing from Russia. I think if these citizens understood that that's where their energy was coming from, a percentage of it, they probably wouldn't be interested in it. They'd be more interested in the pipeline. So talking about infrastructure and helping our listeners understand, we do have these issues specifically. Can you tell us a little bit more, drill down in that? How is that going? Is it changing out of necessity due to now the Ukraine-Russia war? Where are we at with, are we seeing any traction pertaining to a new president his belief, get out of the regulatory way, or let the regulatory bodies get out of their own way and start approving permitting. Have you started to see things change in the area? And has the mindset of these people also changed in certain ways?
Well, one of the challenges that we have in Pennsylvania is that we've become ground zero for the NGOs that oppose fossil fuel development. And the reason being is because, what I talked about earlier is just the growth in natural gas development in Pennsylvania, going from producing just 20% of our own consumption of natural gas to today producing nearly 20% of the entire country's production of natural gas. So they've trained their resources. The foundations have focused on Pennsylvania to really drive the opposition, and they're very effective at it, and they have been very effective at it, particularly as it relates to pipeline and infrastructure development, because they know if they can choke that, they can choke, they can slow upstream development. That
Yes.
said, there have been successes in Pennsylvania to ensure a more mature build out of the internal infrastructure, whether you're talking about the gathering lines, getting it to the existing interstate lines or transmission lines. So we have seen some success, but it's not going away. In fact, it's heating up because now the NGOs see the downstream market as a new target.
Okay, and that's what I want to talk about. We got to take a quick break. When we return, let's get back on that and see where we are with the downstream part of it as well. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show, and we'll be right back. We're back. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. My guest today is newly elected Jim Welty, who is the president of the coalition. I'm sorry, I'm having a day, Jim. Who is the president of the Marcellus Shale Coalition. Jim, before the break, you were discussing these NGOs, these little pesky NGOs. And I thought I had done some research maybe about a month or two back in which there was discussion potentially of charging these organizations um, legally for the obstruction that they keep doing when we talk about energy. And I really want our listeners to understand because while the majority of where we air is in areas like in Texas and New Mexico and Louisiana, Oklahoma, it's very different than what you guys are dealing with. But your area is also extremely vital, just as vital as Texas and all the other shale plays. And yet you guys have a different set of problems that you guys deal with. And so when we look at these NGOs and how they come in, they obstruct, they delay, it makes it really hard. And our listeners need to understand that if we are going to be dominant in the area of AI, if we're going to be able to provide reliable utilities and energy for just ourselves, we're going to need to understand that we need especially natural gas. And we need to continue to develop it here. And what we don't need is obstruction and NGOs that continue to obstruct, or we're not going to make it. And China will come in and take control of artificial intelligence. And I don't think there's a listener that's listening that wants that. Even if you don't support oil and gas, I know you don't support that. So let's go back to talking about these bottlenecks that are occurring in your area. Tell me a little bit about, you mentioned the downstream part. So in
Mhm.
my mind, when I think about pipeline is it's in the midstream area, but now they're going after the downstream. So tell us a little bit, drill down and give us the vision on what's happening in the downstream area that they're causing problems for you guys.
Yeah, and these are anything but little groups that are out there. They're very sophisticated networks that
Oh yeah.
include grassroots groups, that include research arms. They have their own media, and the challenge with the media is that when they put something out, mainstream media thinks it's a legitimate media and don't see the bias. That all said, our industry is keenly aware of their tactics and their efforts, in which is why our operators spend a tremendous amount of times in the communities in which they are operated in Pennsylvania. Unlike, for example, the Permian, we're basically right in the communities that people are living and working. But so are our employees. So we have every reason to be ensuring that we're developing the resource in the most safe and environmentally friendly manner as possible. And that's really what elevates, in part, the Appalachian Basin. But the NGOs are very sophisticated as well, as I said, and they're now training their guns on the downstream opportunities, because they know if they can cancel the downstream opportunities, just like they knew if they could choke the midstream, then we're not going to have the ability and the resources being put into developing the product. So there is a keen focus right now from those groups to focus in on data centers and stirring up communities, just like they did with our industry early on in the play, and continue to do. But we've been able to push past that on the upstream side, and working through that on the midstream side, and now really work to ensure that there's enough communication level happening with those downstream markets and the AI-driven data centers to ensure they're getting in and educating those communities as well. It's that we track what happens in Pennsylvania. One foundation alone just last year injected over $13 million into the efforts to put fossil fuel out of business, put natural gas out of business, essentially. And that's just one of nearly a dozen foundations that are training their sites on Pennsylvania. So it is a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge. We just need to be continuing, one, operating at the highest standards that we can, and two, being the educators in our communities to ensure that the local people understand what is going on with the development, both on the upstream, midstream, and downstream side, and how that benefits them as well.
Right. Jim, I think the thing that surprises me the most is when we talk about these foundations. In the energy industry, whether it's oil or natural gas, what the goal is to produce the product and bring it to market. It's a product that all of us use. And yet these foundations, they don't produce any kind of product. But yet they get millions of dollars and spend millions of dollars in obstructing the very nature of us producing this. Or not us, but you all producing this. And what's shocking to me is that we don't really see it. Citizens don't see, first of all, if you tracked the money, more than likely, you'd see that a lot of that money is coming from outside the United States on countries that it isn't their best interest to slow us down or to let us not lead, but let us follow when we talk about artificial intelligence. And yet these foundations are operating here in the United States. And as you said, $13 million, they don't produce anything. So where is their money coming from? And you have to think about it in that way. I like to, when I have my discussions with family, friends, it's why would a foundation want to obstruct this when we need it for ourselves? First of all, the resources. Everybody enjoys air conditioning in your homes and the lights to come on when you flip a switch. And as simple as that may seem, yet that's exactly what these foundations want to stop. And yet the very technology that they use for disseminating the information is all driven by energy as well. And there's just no logical understanding of where are you going with this, and how do
Yeah.
we provide our allies in these other countries like Europe the resources? Do we want them to be purchasing from other countries like Russia or Iran
Yeah.
that typically, I mean, you just have to look at the big picture and you start understanding something is wrong here with, we're kind of fighting ourselves and it makes no sense. And yet they're here. And these are people who are United States, individuals, and they're so bought into, well, if we don't do it here, where are we going to do it at? Why don't we allow Russia to just build and build and build? And Russia can supply the world's global energy. Can you imagine the mess that we would
Yeah.
be in? That's just a bad idea. And yet these people are not called out themselves if you don't want the resources, then try going a week without it and let's see if you're not out of business, right?
Yeah.
You can't survive without using the very product that you want to put out of business. It's mind-boggling, the stupidity. And yes, I said it. It is mind-boggling, the stupidity. The environment, we do, I want to talk about it when we get back from break because I do care about the environment. I'm an environmentalist myself. But at the same time, You got to make some sense of this. It's either us or somebody else does this. So let's take a quick break. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show, and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. My guest today is Jim Welty. Let me see how I pronounce it. Jim Welty, who is the president of the Marcellus Shale Coalition. Jim, before the break, I think I had a little bit of a meltdown in the way of I just don't understand how sometimes some people think so small in the way of just really they're just laser focused and they won't look at we have to think bigger. And I do care about the environment. We all should. We should care about where we live, the air quality, our food, water protection. All these things are important. And I believe that the United States is probably the best country in the world to produce these resources because we have such great oversight through our regulatory bodies. We are going to do it better than Russia, Iran. I don't care. They don't have these regulatory bodies that have this oversight. And so we should be the leader in this, in the way of teaching the rest of the world how to drill for resources and also try to take care of the planet. But we need them. I want to switch and drill down a little bit on community trust and environmental transparency, because I think it is important that we recognize, I think the energy industry understands their role and how important it is to do it the right way, the most effective way, the greenest ways. So this could be things like water protection, air quality, methane emissions. Tell me the Appalachian communities, they have raised concerns about this. What are the steps that the coalition is taking to improve transparency and maintain trust with the residents? How difficult is it in your area to establish this with the community?
Yeah, so our operators are very active and effective in getting into the communities in which they're operating to do the education before they begin operations. And now, as the play is maturing in Pennsylvania and throughout the Appalachian Basin, I think there's a level of comfort that these communities are developing in most of where we're operating in Pennsylvania, which is really the northern tier of Pennsylvania and southwestern Pennsylvania. Most of the opposition we get primarily is driven from southeastern Pennsylvania, where there is no activity. But that said, we still need to be vigilant in ensuring that our operational standards are second to none, and that we're in the communities and engaging with the communities. And in Pennsylvania, our employee base is living in those communities. They're raising their families in those communities. And to your point, everyone's a conservationist because they're hunting and fishing in Pennsylvania throughout the state, and they want to ensure that our environment is kept as pristine as possible. And quite frankly, the industry's done more for environmental improvement than any NGO has ever done. We were talking about that earlier. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the transition in our electric sector in Pennsylvania, with going to 60% produced by natural gas, we've seen 46% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. We've seen, the criteria air pollutants that cause asthma, like NOx and SOx and VOCs, those drop 93, 98, and 50% respectively, all because of this transition in gas. And I like to say natural gas is not a red or a blue issue. It is a green and it's a black issue. It's a green issue because it's a clean, reliable energy source. And it's a black issue because it's a low-cost energy source that allows consumers to balance their budgets, ensure that they've got low-cost energy coming their way.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about the regulatory landscape as well? The coalition has been involved in litigation and regulatory debate, including Pennsylvania's Chapter 78A rule. So how do you balance the compliance versus advocacy and industry-friendly policies? First of all, let's begin with Chapter 78A. Quickly give us what is that for the listeners who don't know what that is, and how have you been dealing with it?
Yeah, so in 2012, I talked earlier about the founding of the coalition was to raise those regulatory standards under which we operate. 2012, we passed Act 12, which is really the statutory framework under which we operate. Chapter 78A is the regulations that implement that legislation. So there was early on some litigation that the MSC filed to challenge those certain components of the regulation. Now, those regulations, there's dozens of regulations within that Chapter 78A. We challenged 6 of them because we felt primarily they went beyond the statutory construct of Act 12. So we've now made it through that litigation. I think we've got a little more predictability. I think sometimes the frustration that the operators have and the MSC works through is that the Department of Environmental Protection, which is a lead agency that implements those regulations in Pennsylvania, really changes the dynamics of the Chapter 78A, and they change interpretations. So what we're always trying to do as a coalition is ensure regulatory predictability. And that's one of our primary goals as an organization. And so that Chapter 78A is the framework and the construct under which we operate up in Pennsylvania.
Very good. This is the last question, unfortunately, that I'm going to be able to ask you for this show, but it's kind of the future. So you guys host annually the Shale Insight Conference, which we discussed earlier in the show. This is one President Trump has come to. You have a lot of people that attend. I think you said maybe 35 different countries. It's a huge event, which I plan on attending in 2026. First of all, tell us a little bit about the conference. What are there some keys that are emerging for the discussion that you're already starting to see, and how is it going to reflect the industry priorities? But first, when is the conference? So people who might be interested, is it already on your website to be looking what dates and planes and hotels need to start preparing to attend the conference?
We're finalizing the contracts now with the venue up in Erie, Pennsylvania, the Erie Bayfront Convention Center. I think I'm going to say the 24th and 25th of September. It is the last week of September in 2026. But you can go to our website just to make sure I'm right on that as we finalize our contract. But really, as I said earlier, it is the premier shale basin or shale conference in the country. It really focuses on the Appalachian Basin, as I said earlier, which is an all gas play, which makes us a little bit unique. And you know, we typically get regulators, senior regulators out of Washington D.C. Cabinet officials. We had Secretary Burgum join us this past year. Who not only is Secretary of Interior, but the chairman of the National Energy Dominance Council. And then we talk about a variety of issues, the opportunities that are presented through the Appalachian Basin on shale gas development, what operators are seeing as those opportunities, what their business plans are. Toby Rice, Nick Deloso with Expand, all coming forward to kind of talk about where they're going as operators. And then focus again, we expect there to be a tremendous focus on the downstream opportunities, both the AI-driven data centers, LNG exports. I'm sure Toby will be there to talk about unleashing LNG. But that's really the purpose of the conference. And it is a 3-day event where we've got a heightened focus on what's going on in the Appalachian Basin. That's the big stage. And then we've got breakout sessions where we dive into the technical issues that are going on, whether it's waste handling, whether it's transportation issues, any and all of the above when it comes to technical issues, air monitoring, all that gets addressed at the conference in one way, shape, or form. So there's enough for anybody that's interested to join us up in Erie next year at the end of September.
Very interesting. And we're back. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. My guest today is Jim Welty, who is the president. Jim Welty. Is it Welt? Do you pronounce the T? Welty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jim Welty, the president of the Marcellus Shale Coalition. Jim, I've really enjoyed talking to you because we just don't get your area on enough yet. We air in your area and yet on our stations. But yet we don't really talk a lot. So I'm glad you're here. I think it's nice and refreshing to hear what you guys are working on in your area and to just put some context that we have a very important shale play that's going on out there in the Marcellus and Utica, and we need to keep an eye on it and what you guys are working on and try to get information on, assistance and things that you guys may need and how to help you guys. I want to switch gears, and you mentioned in the last segment about Toby Rice, who is, I'm assuming, attending your conference, but he has something to talk. He has something to say when we're talking about y'all being the largest natural gas resource, and yet you all lack LNG export access. So let's switch gears and talk about that because that's interesting. LNG is growing and booming worldwide. The demand, our allies, and yet we see it's a lot of it is primarily being exported from like the Port of Corpus Christi or
Mhm.
Houston Channel. Your basin being the largest in natural gas resources, yet it lacks the LNG export. So, how is the East Coast or the Appalachian LNG capacity shifting economically into opportunities in your region? Has it begun? Or is where are you guys with getting involved in liquefied natural gas?
Great question, Kym. And let me start that um, from an LNG perspective and that opportunity there. We view this as a tremendous opportunity because we've got such tremendous resources in the Marcellus and the Utica shale seams that underlie the Appalachian Basin. Over 100 years of technically recoverable reserves, enough gas to meet our own domestic needs as well as the needs of our allies across the pond. Um, we've got a tremendous focus on it because of the opportunity that it presents for downstream utilization, as I talked about earlier. Right now, our commitments like through EQT, Expand, and others for LNG are firm commitments on the pipeline to get it long hauled down to the coast in Houston, which is where I am actually today. We're been down here all week meeting with
Welcome to
some of our
Texas.
operators at their headquarters. So great to come down here and connect with you. But really, part of that too is to talk about the opportunities that are presented by shale gas in the Appalachian Basin, and we think we've got a unique resource in the Appalachian Basin. Look, we always look at methane intensity in terms of the cleanliness and the efficiency of production across the globe. And the U.S. has one of the lowest methane intensities in gas production in the world. And the Appalachian Basin has the lowest methane intensity of any of the basins in the U.S. So we think that's a marketing opportunity, particularly for our allies in Europe.
Absolutely.
We do have one facility on the East Coast in Cove Point, Maryland, where we've got Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline that runs from the northern tier of Pennsylvania down to Cove Point. And we supply that gas directly to Cove Point for export. We'd love to see another export facility in Philadelphia. We do a tremendous amount of ethane exports and propane exports out of the port of Philadelphia through Energy Transfer, and would love to see another LNG facility there because of its proximity to the supply in the basin, but also its proximity to market with our European allies.
And I'm so surprised when you mentioned that Cheniere and other companies have not looked at your area. Is it the economics right now? Is that what's held it up? Is it regulatory issues? What do you think has prevented? I mean, I know it's not a secret. These guys are experts. They understand, or the natural gas shell play. They understand you're there. Why do you think that they have not taken advantage of looking at LNG and looking at other areas like I think in Corpus Christi, Cheniere has just brought on their fourth or fifth line. They just keep growing out of there. But I'm wondering how come they haven't yet looked at, the Marcellus and Utica being the largest. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Cheniere's doing a tremendous job down here in Corpus Christi and Galveston in what they're doing and building out their facilities. And we'd love to see that same operations up in Pennsylvania. I think part of it, there is a focus right now in Pennsylvania from a policy perspective as to whether we can get something sited in Philadelphia. I think there are conversations with some of the policymakers and the building trades and the industry to see if we can make that happen. But at the same time, we see a lot of capacity coming online over the next, several years, right? And is this supply going to meet that capacity? And I think it becomes an economic question for operators such as Cheniere to say, is this really where we want to go, or do we want to focus on our core asset? We will continue to push for the viability of a facility in Pennsylvania. We believe it's a big uplifting opportunity, just like the AI data centers that we talked about earlier. And
Yes.
that's why you see our operators very heavily focused on that as an opportunity for utilization of their gas, not just that in-basin demand, but to supply our allies across the globe.
Well, you mentioned that you're in Houston, you're visiting some of your clients at their headquarters, and then you're also hoping to look for new business, especially when you're talking about liquefied natural gas. Let's talk a little bit about the future of the region and energy identifiers, since that's kind of what you're doing. Um, you guys, work closely with a lot of the federal and state government agencies. You've been pushing, I think, in some ways to grow, but also decarbonization goals. I hear that from almost every single operator. They are kind of flipping switches. So maybe their portfolio might look at, yes, we still produce our number one asset, could be crude, could be natural gas, but we're also decarbonizing in the way we might be looking at solar, wind, and they've kind of been mixing it up a bit. So what does the Appalachian Basin, y'all's energy identifiers, what does that look like for 2035? Meaning a gas powerhouse, a hydrogen hub potentially, diversification in the energy corridor. Outside of LNG, is there anything else, Jim, that you guys are really going to focus on? Or give us a little bit of a teaser of what we're going to see in this insight that you guys are going to do, the Marcellus Insight Conference in September. What's starting to emerge?
Yeah, we'll continue to see amazing technological advances over the next decade. We've seen it over the last decade, right? I mean, we went from 1 mile. I mean, this is industry wide, whether it's the basin or not, but we went, from 1 mile laterals that were surpassing 5 mile laterals in some instances up in the Appalachian Basin. We're seeing, reduced operating costs. We're seeing reduced emissions because a lot of our operators are moving to electric frac fleets, for example, which have a smaller
Hmm.
footprint and allow them to meet some of their own goals as in terms of emissions. And quite frankly, I was down here meeting with some of those service providers because we also represent the service and supply chain that feeds our operators. So we think there's going to be tremendous advancement, continue to be tremendous advancements, and that's part of our focus. It's not just that regulatory predictability that I talked about, or that infrastructure build out, or as I said, that downstream utilization, all key. It's the operational certainty. And to ensure that we're able to do what we're doing in the most sustained, environmentally friendly, but efficient means possible. And I think that's what stands the Appalachian Basin out as a pure gas play compared to many of the other basins in the country. But we need everybody online, right? We need all resources to the table. Because as you talked about earlier, Kym, we're in a race, we're in a battle to ensure that we're driving the next economy. And that next economy, whether people like it or not, is going to be driven by AI. I think it was Jack Schmidt, the former CEO of Google and Alphabet, who said it best, is that AI is going to be as transformative to our economy as electricity was. And if that doesn't wake people up, I don't know what does. We've got the energy resources in the country, and particularly in the Appalachian Basin, to meet those needs for this global race. And that's why we're keenly focused on ensuring that that future includes Marcellus and Utica natural gas from the Appalachian Basin.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jim. And that's why I'm kind of dedicated 2026 to keep an eye on what you guys are doing because really everything that's coming out of Pennsylvania is really going to be where we're going to start seeing us move with artificial intelligence and, like you said, providing resources to our allies around the globe and really taking that next step. And you guys now with, efficiencies, artificial intelligence, I think I can start seeing how you all will start moving in that direction. So it's an exciting time, I'm assuming, for you and for the area. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. Jim,
Yeah, it,
I'll
it
leave you.
really is. And Kym, you said you wanted to come up to Shale Insight. We welcome you to come up. It's the 22nd through the 24th of September.
Yep.
And put that on your calendar. Love to catch up when you're up there if I don't talk to you before then. But it's really the place to be when you're talking about shale gas development. Encourage all your listeners to take a look
Mhm.
at our website and see more about it.
I hear lots of opportunities. That's what I'm hearing from you is get in now. There's so many opportunities. This is the new wild, wild west. So many different things are going to start happening for you guys because of that specific thing. AI has come. And you guys are the natural gas play. Y'all sitting in the what is it, bird's eye seat. Perfect to grow. So, Jim, thank you. And I'm so happy to have met you. And I hope you're enjoying your presidency. Please stay in touch with us until we have you back on the show. Thank you for being a guest today.
Thank you very much, Kym.